Trigger warning. This episode discusses topics of rape and sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Future is Foster podcast, powered by Raise a Child. I'm your host, Nancy Mogi. I was adopted at 17, and I'm ready to talk all things foster and adoption. Someone has to. This week, joining us is mother and foster care advocate Amy Bernardino. Through struggling to find her voice as a teenager, she has dedicated her life to fighting the stigmas on foster youth, adoption, and the LGBTQ community. Join us as we hear how the life-changing moments in Amy's life led her to promoting positive change and being a fierce advocate. Hi, everyone. This is Nancy Mogi. Welcome back to the Future is Foster podcast, where we talk about all things foster and adoption and the amazing people who share their stories, spread awareness, and dedicate their lives for the betterment of foster youth getting the resources they need. Specifically, within the realm of the foster and adoption system, there are very important people who have, gone through what they have gone through, but not only that, they've shared it and they've recruited so many people to join the good fight about helping foster youth and people become foster parents. And I've been very fortunate enough of being able to join the Raise a Child board. And since day one, there has been an amazing individual. She has helped me so much. She is a powerhouse. She is a leader. She makes the best spreadsheets I've ever seen. And most importantly, she's a mother. Please welcome Miss Amy Bernardino.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
This podcast specifically went into effect because we had our last summit and we were talking about ways to spread awareness and make content and how we were paying other people to make content for us and do all these things. And I was like, why don't we do it? Why don't we make the content? Or why don't people pay us to be on our content? We have such an amazing organization and community of people that just, they want to share. They want to uplift people. They need the microphone. So that's what we're here for. So I thank you so much for, since day one, really rooting for me with this podcast journey.
You've been doing amazing with it. Really proud that you're, proud of you, happy that you're doing this. I think it's, any medium that we can use to get the word out there is important.
Absolutely. Specifically, I know you very well. I've got to, laugh with you, experience you, learn from you, and be inspired by you. I've been able to meet your amazing family, but not everyone has been so fortunate. So I want to take it back. Day one, Amy Bernardino enters this world. What was your family situation like growing up?
So I grew up in Northern California with two older brothers who were twins. They're about 6.5 years older than me. So that basically makes me an only child. Not that I don't love my brothers and that we're not close, but the age gap is such that
you weren't playing with blocks with
right.
each other.
We never were in the same school at the same time. There were all of these different things, and they were twins, so they had each other. So I was kind of going solo. Flash forward to about 5 years ago, I find out that I have an older sister as well. She's 9 years older than me through my dad's prior marriage. My brothers are my half brothers. I never really, unless I'm talking specifically about this subject, I don't refer to them as my half brothers. They're my brothers. But yeah, then all of a sudden I have this sister, and that's a whole other podcast episode.
Got it.
Because that journey was crazy. But now I have my relationship that I have with my brothers, and I have a relationship with my sister, and my sister has reconnected with my dad too. And like I said, whole other podcast. I did grow up feeling like, I wish I had a sister, or I wish I had someone closer to my age. So it was, but it wasn't a bad childhood. Yeah. It was just, that's just the facts. That's just what it was. Yeah.
There's so many different ways to describe a family and, sharing your point of view of you wish you had a sibling or you wish you kind of had that partner in a way. It makes a sense of there's a lot of foster kids that feel the same way when they're in homes and everything. But specifically, since we're on the topic of foster and adoption, did you know anyone that was adopted or fostered growing up?
So I'm significantly older than you. If I did, it probably had a little bit more stigma to it than it does now. And so I don't recall until I had my own firsthand experience with the whole thing. I don't recall ever, even really being familiar with the concept. Of someone saying,
oh, I'm adopted or I'm adopting, let alone having LGBTQ parents adopting.
Oh, yeah. So that I never would have thought of. And I was... in high school was very good friends with members of the LGBTQ family, and that's another family, that's chosen
Yeah.
family, and watched as their parents shunned them, and their religious communities, exiled them, and all of these different things. And I knew I would fight for my friends.
And there was a part of you that struck a fire of like, wait, I need to advocate for them. I need to be a voice for them of this ultimately silenced community.
I think probably not then, because this is like, it wasn't normal to be an advocate. I don't think that was really a term that was used all that often, unless you were like deep in the political scheme of it. But I just knew that they were being treated differently for something that
you didn't know why.
They didn't have control over. Like, and there was nothing wrong with what they were.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Did you always know you wanted to be a mother?
No, I did not want to be a mother.
You did not want to be a mother.
I was hell on wheels when I was a kid, and I did not want to like have karma like bring that down on me. And no, I didn't.
You did not. Okay,
No.
Interesting. But sometimes life works in mysterious ways that, you can't always control or you don't always expect to happen.
Well, listen, at that time, if what you think or feel when you're 15, 16, 17, 18 is what you're stuck with the rest of your life, I would have a heart-shaped tattoo with a Motley Crue banner, going through it. So things, you change your perspective and you realize what's important and what's not.
That's growth. That's beautiful. And thinking about all the stuff I liked and didn't like when I was 15 and 16. Absolutely not. But specifically, what was your first experience as a mother? Spoiler alert, I already told everyone you are a mother, but what was the first
So
experience?
I'm a mother and I'm a birth mother. So I'm on the other side of the foster to adopt spectrum. When I was 16, I was raped. And I grew up in a religious household. I wasn't really myself, but my parents were my mother rather was very religious, is very religious. And rape even wasn't something that you talked about all that often at that time. It's
how
92,
do you
93.
even admit that, and especially on a camera? Like, thank you for sharing that.
I didn't even realize that that's what had happened to me. I knew that, I went out and I was 16 and I drank alcohol. And I woke up and I knew something had happened and I knew who the other person was. But to me, it didn't register as rape because I think then rape was a very violent, like someone's abducted or like there's all these different things that you think of when you see in the movies or whatever that say what rape should look like. But sometimes rape is, the 28-year-old person that you work with after school who takes advantage of the fact that you were 16 and drinking.
And it's a moment, literally, it doesn't matter how it happened, who did it, where it happened, what you were drinking, what you were smoking. If there's a moment where you are taken advantage of, it's unacceptable. And, specifically you even mentioned like back then they may have not. I've always talked about it, and I know I'm very grateful now to live in a generation where we have the Me Too movement, we have people standing up and speaking up. But in my situation, when I was young, I was sexually abused my entire childhood to the point where I didn't even realize it was sexual abuse because it was a family member. So an uncle wouldn't do that to me or an aunt wouldn't do that to me. That's till I started speaking up about it and noticing, wait, like their uncle doesn't touch them like that. They don't have to sleep in the same bed with that person. And when I spoke up about it with my biological mother and my other biological family members, they were just like, no, like, you're doing it for attention. You don't know what you're talking about. God is watching you saying this. Like, basically shut up and don't try to send your family member to jail. And I did. And I let it continue to happen because I didn't understand. And it really wasn't until I got very comfortable with the family that ended up adopting me and started talking about it that they're like, wait, what? Like, that's not okay. You need to speak up about it. And then I did start speaking up about it. But it's also not always something that you can prove. Like, you became pregnant. You couldn't have proved you were specifically raped. I doubt you had the knowledge at the time to know to go to a rape kit, get a rape kit or anything. But I really thank you for sharing that. And we'll obviously add the disclaimer of that because it is a very heavy topic. But we all know at least one person who has undergone sexual abuse, male or female. And it's especially worse when you are not an adult and you are a child. And 16, you basically were a child. You didn't know what was going on in the world. So with that, I know some people may just say, oh, just, abort it. But that's not always an option for people.
So, and it was a road that I was going to take, and I had an
Mhm.
appointment to do it. But I knew how my mother felt about abortion, and I was terrified through the whole. So, first of all, I never told my mother that I was pregnant. I lived with my mother and my brothers.
Okay.
I never told my mother that I was pregnant. I concealed it. I hid it away. I ignored it. I was in this very odd psychological state the entirety.
Denial.
Yeah, just
Avoidance.
complete denial that I would wake up and it would just not be a thing. Not that I would even miscarry, but it just would not be a thing. I was in a dream, a nightmare, rather.
Yeah.
And so I did have an appointment to have an abortion, and the only person that I can turn to take me to it was the person who raped me, because I knew him. And again, it wasn't registering that not only did he take advantage of the fact that I was blackout drunk, but he was 28 and I was 16. So there's many reasons how, it's not
now looking
just
back, you're like, maybe that's not.
That's probably wasn't, so I remember sitting in his truck and I was sobbing in tears because I was terrified I would disappoint my mother, who I hadn't even told. And he said, "What the F are you crying about? I'm the one who's out $600 for this." And I slapped him across his face, took the money, and walked home.
Yeah.
And went back to, I'm just going to wake up and this is going to be gone.
Yeah.
My mother would kind of like poke my stomach and say, "Is everything okay? You're not pregnant, are you?" In that kind of way that mothers have. And I would be insulted and, offended, and how dare you.
Talking about sex with your parent, especially as a teenager, is never easy.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful. But one day she picked me up from work and said, "I scheduled a medical appointment for you." And I was like, "Great, here it goes." I had kept on having this recurring dream of my mom getting up at the doctor's office, hearing that I was pregnant, and walking out the door. And so we went to the doctor's office, and he said what he had to say. And my mom got up and she walked to the door and she sat down in the chair right by the door. And then I kind of let out this huge sigh of relief. And then I went into labor that night.
Wow. Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. It was very evident that I was in no state to raise a child.
Absolutely.
No pun intended with the name there. But I was in no state whatsoever. My mother, financially, couldn't, and I knew she wouldn't want to anyway, because it would have just been a whole weird thing. After I had the baby, I didn't know the sex of the child. I didn't want any contact. I wanted nothing. Would have been
made it harder for you.
I needed to walk away from it. I needed that to be my I woke up and everything is, over with kind of moment.
Unfortunately, that baby, who I'm sure is an amazing human individual now, was literally a symbol of your trauma, of your pain, of your torture. And most importantly, okay, I guess you somewhat had a choice to do the abortion, but you really didn't. You were living under a roof. Abortion and sexual reproductive rights was not as widely talked about and supported. You couldn't just walk up to a Planned Parenthood or, call a number and get a support from it. You really had to face this for the most part alone till your mom came in. Regardless of whoever's watching this, everyone's allowed to have their own political and religious views. But I hope that anyone who goes through a similar experience as this, I would wish it on them in the world, to know that they should have a choice. And there are people who have had this shared experience.
And find someone to talk to.
Yeah.
If that's the one thing you can do, is find someone to talk to about what you're going through, because 9 months of that psychological torture,
definitely,
I don't recommend it. It's not my favorite thing. But in the hospital the next morning, my mother had brought in a private foster agency, immediately. And what I didn't know at the time, and I didn't know until many years later, was that it was a very, very religious organization.
Oh, okay.
That does not allow LGBTQ families to adopt. It is not supportive of the
in
LGBTQ
California,
in California, and they're still active, and it's still a player in the space. I didn't want any contact, like I said, when I first.
You weren't thinking, let me think of what's the best thing to do for the baby. You were thinking about yourself, as you should.
Yeah. And then a few weeks later, I would go places with my mom or with friends, and I would like anytime I would see a child, I was like, I don't know if that's my child. I didn't know what really happened once you put a
Yeah.
child in the foster care system, because why would I have had to think about that?
When did you know that the organization, was something that discriminated against
Like
the people you love?
20 years later.
Wow.
Like many, many, many years later. And I told my mom, I said, I think, if there's still an opportunity for me just to see the baby, just so I know,
They're
I can see the
happy, they're
face.
healthy.
And my mom was like, well, I took this picture. And so she had hid it,
Yeah.
but, she had a loss too.
She did, yeah.
She had much less time to deal with it, but we probably dealt with it the same way,
Yeah.
And then from there, I said, okay, I think that I want to know that she's going to go into the right home.
Mm-hmm.
And so we contacted the foster agency and asked if I was still able to, help with this, looking through the books for the parents. It used to be in like this big binder with just pictures and letters that the families would write in saying, here's our family now and here's, what we want. And so, there was a couple in there and they had a son that they had adopted, fostered to adopt as well. And they talked about open adoption. And I said, what is open adoption? And the woman explained to me that means that you have that option to be in that child's life in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just pictures and letters, for as long as it's mutually beneficial
For the kid too.
Yeah, and so I said, okay, I think I can try that.
Mm-hmm.
That was 30 years ago. I see my daughter 3 or 4 times a year. I text with her. We have a relationship. We go and have
That's beautiful.
Christmas dinners with their whole extended,
Yeah.
her parents, her brother, his family, my family. We all get together. My son.
That's beautiful. And that's a
yeah.
miracle and so much strength within you and so much strength for your daughter as well to essentially forgive you. And I'm sure you shared your story about what happened. I can't imagine anyone being mad at you after, what happened.
We haven't had a conversation about it.
Oh, interesting.
We have this basic understanding, and it is more like I'm like her older friend, like older aunt or whatever. She obviously, if you see a picture of this next to each other, it's ridiculous.
She knows you wanted the best for her, and you needed to do what was best for you. And there's nothing selfish about that.
And we've just each accepted those roles.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were going to be to one another.
Mm-hmm.
But, that was also for 18 years, it was, okay, this is the birthday where I'm going to find out that she doesn't want me to come visit her. This is,
the
the
suspense,
Christmas where
the shame
they're not going to
too.
respond. Right. The whole thing.
Yeah.
My mother not acknowledging to anyone that I had a daughter for years and years and years before we got to that point.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of trauma involved with it, but also on my daughter's side, it was years too, I understand, of her not knowing if I was going to want to continue the relationship.
Yeah.
So it definitely goes both ways. So if you're fostering or fostering to adopt and you have that relationship with the birth mother or even the birth father, there are definitely 2 sides to the story.
Yeah.
And, all foster situations
are different.
But they all start with trauma.
Yeah.
Because
that is true.
A child is being removed from its original family and put into a different situation. And it matters how you deal with the trauma. It matters how you talk about the birth mother in front of the child.
Yeah. You don't shame them. You don't make
your
them
words
hate them.
matter.
Absolutely.
And my daughter's parents, I think, did a remarkable job. If 30 years later, we're still all able to come together
have dinner and bond. She's able to see you be a mother when you were ready.
Yeah.
So when was your second chance with motherhood? How did that happen?
So I moved to Southern California and got married a few years later and still wasn't really wanting to have kids. And then just one day, I don't know. I don't know if it just took me being in a stable relationship.
Mm-hmm. Maybe there not being a trauma that leads to the pregnancy too.
And it was, we actively tried. I didn't accidentally get pregnant. We actively tried.
You were ready.
I was ready, and I, have an amazing 19-year-old son.
He's the best.
He is my number one supporter.
Yeah.
I am so proud of who he is and what he's become and the good he's trying to put out into the world. And he's a fantastic kid.
He absolutely is. My first experience meeting with him is like, I'd see him at, the miscellaneous Raise a Child events, and he was always so polite and so nice and so welcoming. And especially the moments where I'm like just at the DJ booth, he was always like so curious and asking questions and, making everyone around him really feel valued for being there. At first, I didn't even know who was your son. I just thought he was some
rando
teenage boy walking around, wanting to see what was going on. But most importantly, the most strongest memory I have of you and your son was at the most recent Raise a Child Honors Gala that happened last fall. And, it's the end of the night, everyone's dancing, having a good time. I'm in the back making it all happen. And you guys were just dancing and having fun. And you were like, hey, I think it was like a Dolly Parton song. And you're like, can you play this song? Like, my son likes it. And I literally, when the song came on, I saw your son like jolt up. I haven't seen anyone get that excited about a country song in a very long time.
Yeah, he's a Dolly fan.
He's a big Dolly fan. And you guys just danced and with everyone and like Kristen, who's also on the board and a close friend of yours. And it just really, it was so beautiful to see that relationship. It's really hard for teenagers to have good relationships with their moms, with their parents. And it just is such a good ode to you that you've made it such a safe space for him to share with you that.
That was so important to me. And my mother raised me in a different time, and she raised me the best that she could. And I love my mother dearly, and we're close.
Yeah, she was raised differently.
She was raised differently, and I knew that I needed to be a different kind of parent. Not that one is better or worse, but I needed to be a different kind of parent to my son. And I needed... I don't want a relationship where I'm walking up to him and poking him and going, "You're pregnant?" Yeah, like that kind of thing.
Are you having sex?
Right. Yeah. I want a relationship where he can come to me. Yeah. And he has, and he's in the LGBTQ community. I got his written consent actually to say that because it's important to me that. I'm not speaking out of turn when I'm speaking, at him. I've asked him, can I discuss this in this forum and that forum?
It's his identity. Yeah, it's his him. Role. It's his life and path. And unfortunately, that does come with a lot of extra hurdles in the world we live. I hope that when I'm older that, if my kids come out to me and they tell me that, I can say, that's okay. The world's not going to hate you, but the world's always going to find reasons to hate you and make things harder. But I know, especially as a parent, you want to protect your child as much as possible from this this horrible stigma against them and everything. And specifically with, sharing that your son is a part of the LGBTQ community, I'm sure that took a lot of realization and strength of his part to not only admit it to himself, but being able to come to his parent and say, Mom, this is who I am. This is the type of people I love. Yeah. And I'm sure you were like, the most supportive parent ever about it.
I have a rainbow tree in my living room, like a Christmas tree that's there all year round, and it has been for years. Yeah. I mean, because I saw, what happened to friends and, you can't swim in a pool with this person because he's gay and you might get AIDS. Those kinds of things, and thinking, this is insanity. Yeah. None of this is
not accurate. Even true. Yeah.
And you're shouting it, from the pulpit. You're shouting it from everywhere you can. And I just knew that wasn't going to be me.
Totally. And specifically with, the hate that comes from every religious group, and there's always an extremism in any type of religion, any type of community, and of any form. But specifically, I feel like there's an overall goal that people just want you to be in denial and not admit that you're gay, and that maybe you'll just forget or it just won't happen. But that's obviously not working. Right. That's, so I'm so happy that you and me and just everyone that's a part of this production, we're changing not only the view of family, but we're also changing the view on the LGBTQ community. I hate how we have to say it in front of, but it's like, no, that is them. And, that's amazing. When did you officially get involved with helping foster youth? I'm sure there was maybe some part of you after giving up for a child for adoption that wanted to work with adopted children or adoptive parents.
So in the couple of years that followed, and this is me being right out of high school, basically, I worked with that organization, the foster organization. And I would
not raise a child.
Not raise a child. No, the religious organization that my mother had gotten me affiliated with. And I would speak to teens who were pregnant and just talk to them about my journey and the open adoption process.
Yeah.
And, this is where it can be extremely hard. This is where it can be extremely enlightening. There's, there's different
gratifying.
parts of it. And then I would speak also to prospective parents. And, because again, it was at a time where open adoption wasn't really like a common concept. And so I would talk to them about my experience as a birth mother, going through the open adoption. So I did that for a while. And then I, got sucked into the whole corporate world and all of that. And 5 years ago, it'll be 5 years in July, I think, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And it completely out of the blue. It was, discovered through a regular mammogram. There was no other detection.
No overlying health issues.
No
or
underlying
anything?
health issues, no family issues at that time. Since then, yes, but but no lump even. No, just nothing. I was just going for my regular appointment, and that makes you change how you think about things.
It's a near-death experience. You went from thinking you have the whole life ahead of you of there's something in my body trying to kill me.
Yeah. And I went, surgery, chemo, radiation. I got out of radiation and being in that kind of protective immunity bubble in February of 2020.
Wow.
And then COVID hit. We all had a lot of time during COVID to learn how to make bread and and think about life and try to be homesteaders. And, half of us failed and we tried to raise chickens. I didn't try to raise chickens, but like almost everyone I know did during COVID. Probably a whole other podcast.
I tried making bread, but
Yeah, exactly. The whole bread thing. But that was when I realized that, okay, my son is going to be leaving for college in a few years. And do I like what I've done with my life? Do I think that what I'm doing for my work right now is fulfilling enough so that, I can look back on just the experiences I've had so far and go, yeah, totally worth it. Like from a professional perspective, from a family perspective, absolutely.
Yeah. You got a great son, check mark.
Yeah, I have a relationship with my daughter, relationship with my family, everything else. But,
it's your give back mission. You felt like there was more of you to give.
There's more that I could do. And I had corporate governance board experience with a different organization that I was affiliated with before, but it was also part of the job that I was doing is helping facilitate board meetings and things like that for the financial services company that I was working for. And so I thought, maybe I can try to get on a nonprofit board of some type. I think I posted something on LinkedIn and somebody reached out to me and they were doing a Cause Cupid event, and it's like speed dating for board people who want to be on boards, on nonprofit boards specifically, and then for the nonprofit boards themselves. Yeah. And so I went to an event and I was kind of looking around. They have the nonprofit organization stand up and do a pitch, and then everybody circulates and has conversations. And I wasn't really finding anything that I clicked with all that much. And the guy running the event came up and said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I think I want to do something in support of the LGBTQ community generally." And he said, "Okay, I think I have something that'll get us there." And so I met with Maggie, who is on the board of Raise a Child. She was a representative there. And she explained to me the mission of Raise a Child and how there is very heavy emphasis placed on not just the LGBTQ youth in the system, but kids of color, medically fragile kids, kids who've been sexually trafficked.
The hardest kids to get adopted.
Kids, older kids, all of the kids that they are overrepresented in the system, but they're underrepresented when it comes to placement and
resources
and the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And I said, yeah, wait a second. That is the way that I honor both of my kids. Like this is
beautiful.
The connection.
It's a 2-in-1 deal.
Yeah. And like from there, it just took off, and that was just the best move.
Board member ever since. You're running every single board, and real quickly, I really like how you mentioned how it was during the pandemic, where I feel like a lot of people I know too, we had this realization of like, what am I doing with my life? I mean, specifically in your situation, you had such a massive health scare, and you had so much happen that you really were like, okay, if God forbid this were to happen again, am I going to be ready to die? And specifically for me, I was walking down the street and I was actually really deep in my feels, in my mode, thinking about what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm about to graduate college. I don't feel like I've given back to the world enough yet. I just got adopted by this great family and now I'm just too good to help. And there's still all of these kids who don't have families and don't have resources. And, like, why am I so lucky? Why did I get placed to do that? And I looked up, I saw a street lamp banner for a Raise a Child. And I immediately, that moment, I whipped out my phone and I sent them an email, hopped in a Zoom and everything. And since then, it's been like, okay, for me, this is why I had the childhood I did. This is why I was forced to have a voice in the court system. This is why I was given a family that, pushes me to be my best and do my best in the world. And I'm so happy our paths cross on the board. I've learned so much from you, and I've learned so much from you already, but just sitting here, like, I thank you so much for being vulnerable with me and letting me being vulnerable with you as well.
Sharing our stories helps the people who don't feel comfortable sharing their own.
Yeah.
Because they say, I'm not alone. There's somebody else who's gone through this. There's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
There's, but not everyone has the opportunity or even the desire to share. And I just think that, if that's something that I can do that makes some kind of difference, then I'm going to do it.
The wild child, rebel without a cause, teenager that had a voice, just didn't know how to use it. Now you're using that voice to do good in the world. So thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you, you guys, as well, for listening and watching and joining us on this journey. The Raise a Child organization is an amazing place to help LGBTQ youth, whether they want to adopt and foster or whether they are within the system. And they are essentially more likely to go through more placements because people don't want to give them a loving home. But we're here to change that, and we're here to advocate. So thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Amy and Raise a Child, please click the link below, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Future is Foster.
Let's roll the credits. The Raise a Child organization for supporting foster youth. Max Fogelman, executive producer. Mike DeLay at Real Voice LA, audio engineer. Akash Gunver, editor and audio production. Georgie Hristo, editor and short-form content specialist. Ahud Schechter, theme song producer. AdLarge Media for hosting and distribution. And to our listeners, thank you for making the future foster.